Hello, everyone. On behalf of Career Mill, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on ScrumBan. As the name indicates, this is going to cover a little bit of Scrum and Kanban to start off, and we will definitely get deeper into what is ScrumBan and how would you apply that at your workplace. A little bit of introduction about myself. I have met many of you, but would for the sake of people whom I have not interacted before, myself, Shijo. I work as a trainer and an enterprise agile coach focused on transforming organizations in their agile journey. I work as a trainer for a few of the IC Agile courses, a few courses from SAFE, as well as from Scrumming, running their SMPO workshop, as well as Scrum at Scale, and a few more other trainings. So we can connect more if you would like to talk about any of these trainings or would like to get some mentoring on the certifications or anything agile, just feel free to reach out. That's my contact details right there. So today we are going to talk about ScrumBan, but before that you need to know a little bit of Scrum and Kanban. I would assume that all of you are very familiar with Scrum. But just a very brief overview of Scrum and a little bit into Kanban. And then we will talk about a few more other things before we get into ScrumBan, like the interrupt pattern. Some of you might be familiar with it. Some of you might be using it with a different name. But we will talk about what is an interrupt pattern. And then why ScrumBan, the key principles of ScrumBan. We will have a practical project that we are going to pick up. We will see how we can apply ScrumBan there. That will happen throughout our workshop here. And finally, you will set up the ScrumBan board for yourself as well as and figure out what metrics to look at. Sounds good. Any questions on the agenda? I hope this is what you were looking for, right? Any comments, questions?
Oh.
Okay, all good. So let's move forward. Now, for us to get to applying ScrumBan, let's get really practical. Yeah, so we are going to look at one of these organizations called TechFit. TechFit is a fitness app, and it's a startup. It's a startup which is also at the core front of technology. It's not just a fitness app, but we have so many of them out there, but it's a AI-driven fitness app. Yeah. So what would be some of the features you can think of for an AI-driven fitness app? You could talk, you could put in the chat.
One, all the metrics of the stats.
Yeah, the stats, the individual stats. Yeah, I can also see that people are putting custom personalized fitness plan and so on. Yeah, so quite a number of features you can already think of, right? Yes, so they also have quite a number of features to work on. Like any startup, they have aggressive commitments to their customers. They want to get out there as early as they can, get the market share before other players move in this AI market space for fitness apps. And you know what? They have decided to use Scrum and they have hired you as the Scrum Master. They do have one cross-functional team, so it's beautiful, right? So you have the privilege of working with this startup, this one team, and helping them in their journey and getting them to a high-performing team, delivering value for the customers. Yeah. Okay, so with that, let's very briefly look at Scrum. I'm pretty sure all of you understand everything that is written here. Of course, in Scrum, you do have the product backlog, which is refined on a continuous basis. And you have the sprints, you have the Scrum Master, the developers, the three accountabilities. You do have the sprint starting with sprint planning. You have a daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective, and a few artifacts and commitments, starting with the sprint backlog, with the sprint goal. You have the product backlog and the product goal, as well as the increment and the commitment for that, the definition of that. So these are some of the things that you can keep in mind about Scrum as we get a little bit deeper into ScrumBan. These are some of the aspects that will, again, we will go through that. Now, for Scrum, you have, as a Scrum Master, help the team understand what is Scrum, just like what we saw in the earlier slide. And you have the first sprint start off with the sprint planning. There's already refined backlog available, so it's all going great. So far, so good. And a few sprints later, remember, this is a startup with aggressive market commitments and so on. So they already have quite a number of customers started to use the product TechFit. Now they do have a little bit of challenge, right? The support has started coming in, and there are times where the support volume is a little bit on the higher side. They also have so many great ideas that's coming up as the business leadership is constantly in touch with the various customers, market segments, competition, and so on. So the priority keeps moving. Just even within a few days of the sprint start, whatever planning they have done kind of goes for a toss, right? So it's a pain for the team to see that, oh, whatever planning that we have done so far is not valid anymore. Yeah, I've seen that. Some of you are nodding. Yeah, absolutely, right? This is something which is very familiar for many organizations. So let me just introduce to you what is called an interrupt pattern. So you do have the product backlog. It is an ordered list of product backlog items. So you have items which have these estimates of 8 points, 5 points, 5 points, 3 points, and so on. Now, what happens is, as people have the sprint backlog, from the top of the list, they do have what is called Kaizen. What is Kaizen, by the way?
It's a Japanese word.
It's a Japanese word. Yes, that's right. Now, where do you get a Kaizen? At the end of which event you would have a Kaizen?
Yeah, it's a retro.
Sprint retrospective. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so at the end of sprint retrospective, your team has identified what is one experiment that you would like to run for the coming sprint. Yeah, so that is the Kaizen. It's a continuous improvement thing, right? And you have picked up the story from the at the top of the list. And probably if you are not a support team, maybe you will pick up the rest of the stories worth another 23 points if this is the team's capacity. But if it is support team, what you do is you take a look at the previous few sprints and see how much of interrupts the team has faced over the last, let's say, 3 sprints. That is the empirical data, right? Why would you do that? Because interrupts keeps coming. Some are support cases, some could be even management saying that, oh, okay, can you guys do this also, or help that other team, and so on. It can be some sales person who would like to get a demo setup up and running for an important customer demo. It might come to you. So there are certain things which can wait. Who would decide that? The product owner. Yeah. But there are certain things which need to be done, but not immediately. It can wait for the next sprint. So Can it wait for later? Yes, please. Let it wait. But because it is business, there could be some things which need to be done now. So what would you do? You will have to pick it up in the middle of the sprint, even though it was not planned. So those are called the interrupts. And what you do is you look at the average capacity the team has been spending on interrupts and plan for spending that much amount of capacity in the coming sprint. This is an extreme case of the majority of the team's capacity going in for interrupts or a support team. But let's say if the team is spending 10 points on an average for interrupts, you would probably keep that much capacity aside and pick up stories for the remaining capacity of the team. Makes sense, right? We will not get into the canceling sprint and so on, but yeah, let's move on. Now, of course, so one of the ideas is, okay, yeah, we have all this changing backlog, support cases coming in. So let's use interrupts. But what if the interrupts are so varying in nature that like in some sprints it is almost like 0 point, some sprints it is almost the entire sprint capacity. That is a challenge. Now, how about Kanban? Now, Kanban, again, let me very briefly take you through a few important aspects of Kanban. Kanban, as most of you understand, it's a beautiful pull-based system. Here, what we have is called the work items. So you have the work items go in a flow. And what are the different stages? So what you do is first you need to look at what are the different stages in our workflow. So you visualize the workflow stages, and that is this title that you see for each of these columns: development, code review, testing, deployment in this particular case. And then after it goes through all these stages, it moves to done. You will also notice that there is this in progress and done, and it is a pull signal, right? So what happens is that it does not move from in progress in development to in progress in code review just like that. What's the criteria? So you also see some numbers in brackets. Those are called the work in progress limits. Each of these workflow stages do have a capacity limitation based on the number of experts who can handle those workflow stages. So what happens is, let's say, taking an example of development. So you have 3 as the maximum capacity for this. So you cannot have more than 3 items in progress for this particular stage. And once it is done, it moves to the done state or done column of development. And whenever the code review stage has additional capacity, they can pull in work from the done of development into the in progress of code review. So that's a work in progress limit, WIP limit. Now, one final thing about Kanban that I would also like to share with you is about how they do planning. Kanban does not have sprints or sprint boundaries. So essentially, there is no sprint planning. So what happens is it's a continuous flow, right? So as soon as you are done with the items that you're working on, and then you need to pick up a new item, what you do is called a JIT planning, just in time, JIT planning. Yeah. So you pull the item, do a small planning around that particular item, and then start working on it. You're not going to plan for 2 weeks or the sprint duration because there is no sprints in Kanban. Yeah. Okay. So very briefly, that's about Kanban. That's just enough for us to talk about ScrumBan. That's our main topic for today, right? So what is ScrumBan? As the name indicates, it's a combination of Scrum and Kanban. The way I would put this is get the best of both Scrum and Kanban. How does it really work? Especially, let's get back to the context of the tech fit organization that you are Scrum mastering. Think about their challenges. They do have a challenge of incoming support cases, which you cannot really predict. They also have a challenge of changing priorities. Yeah. So what happens in ScrumBan is you can decide how much of Scrum you want to bring in or how much of Kanban you want to bring in. Now, what I would do is share with you my experience and what I have seen working as you bring in some Scrum and some aspects of Kanban, right? Because it is not defined, like, for example, Scrum do have Scrum guide. So there is no ScrumBan guide per se. So it's really up to the coach who is helping the organization uh, adapt to this as to how much of Scrum we would bring in and so on, right? So in my experience, what I have seen is when you have a situation like this, what you would do is you won't have a sprint planning to start off. So what you do is you pull in work as you have as the team sees that they have capacity. Now, pretty much everything else actually remains same. Do you have sprints? You can have the sprint boundary drawn at in your as in your typical Scrum. For example, if your Scrum is having 2 week sprints, every 2 weeks you can draw the boundary line. Even though you did not start off the sprint with a sprint planning, you are going to end your sprint, if you want to call it still a sprint, right? And what you would do is you have the sprint end boundary. You look back at the, let's say for a 2 week sprint, you look back at the previous 2 weeks and see how much of work has been completed in those 2 weeks, done, right? Meeting the definition of done. And you can then generate your velocity chart, have your sprint review as usual with your stakeholders, helping them understand or giving them a demo of the completed work and getting the feedback from them. You can do your sprint retrospectives and so on. Yeah, that sounds good, right? So you are getting the best of Scrum without having to struggle with a change sprint backlog. Yeah, so that is what we are going to start off here. Now, remember, right? How do you plan in Scrum? Well, you have the JIT plan. Where did you get it from? This is from Kanban directly, right? Just in time planning. So you pull in a task as and when you need to, based on the team's capacity. Scrum does not mandate WIP limits, but in ScrumBan, it's a great idea. In fact, even in Scrum, it's a good practice that you can bring in it into the Scrum framework. So you limit the amount of work that is in progress so that there is focus. And what you want to see happen is that you have limited work in progress, so that is a smooth flow. What happens is that over a period of time, as you observe how is this flow, you will realize that there are stages where work is getting stuck. So what would happen is that there are stages in your entire workflow where it takes longer for a work item to move to the next stage or to move to the done stage, right? So that is where you start looking at, okay, how do we now help this particular workflow stage be unblocked or get things moving faster in this? We will later talk about some of the charts which will help us measure this kind of bottlenecks and identify them and help improve that. So what will happen is that as you start working in this mode of uh, a smooth flow, you start looking at where are the bottlenecks which we what are the bottlenecks we have today and how do we improve on that. And how do we look at this, the entire sprint from a sprint boundary perspective and start looking at it from the perspective of the stakeholders to get the feedback as a team to improve our ways of working on a continuous basis and so on, right? So that is how Scrum Band really helps in our context. What we also need to do is we need to have now a new different board for Scrum Band. Remember, we had our Scrum board, but it's slightly different. Uh, we have to define our workflow, we have to define our WIP limits, and then we already have the prioritized backlog, so that part becomes easy. So let's take a look at this. As you can see, you have the different workflow stages that I have visualized for you. That's starting with the design, the coding, the code reviews, test review, and then the item move to done stage. And each of these workflow stages do have in progress and done columns. Makes sense, right? Here you have three different rows. These are called swim lanes. Typically, the top row is the one which is of the highest priority. If something gets onto the to be done column here or the work items column here, which means that the team would have to immediately pick it up and then start working on it, and compared to the other two swim lanes, which is probably the typical regular feature work or let's say the support and the regular feature work and so on, right? So this might be critical. The very first row might be the critical defects, which might be hindering some of the customers from using tool. If you look at the WIP limits, I have put 1 as a WIP limit for design, 3 for coding, and so on. So what it means is that at any point of time, we can only have one design work item in progress. So in this case, the orange one is in progress. So which means you cannot have any more work, any more design items. So the people with the design expertise in the team is fully focused on this and getting it done. On coding, you have 3. That's the capacity of the team to pull in 3 coding items into in progress. And after that, they can move it to done, but code review cannot pick up all of the done ones, because here you have 2 as a WIP limit for code reviews. So even though there are 3 items in done stage in coding, you still keep them there, and only when another one of these code review items has been done, they can pick up the next item from coding. Likewise, for test review and test review do not have it done, because that's a final stage and directly it is getting to done stage. Make sense? Any questions so far? I hope you are able to connect with your organization. Yeah, sorry. What was the comment?
No, I think we are good in understanding.
All right. Yeah, there is always this confusion. Oh, okay, so Scrum Band means that we don't need product owner, Scrum Master. Yeah, so Scrum Band, like we earlier talked about, right? It is up to you how much of Scrum you are going to bring in. But we have done Scrum, we have understood the need for Scrum Master, and of course, the product owner, and having a cross-functional team and so on, right? So it's a great idea, isn't it? You need somebody who can own the product backlog. Yeah, and we need somebody who is the change agent, that is a Scrum Master. We need a cross-functional team that can get uh, this work items to done stage, meeting the definition of done. So we are bringing in a lot of Scrum and some of Kanban and getting the best out of both. So finally, let's take a look at a few of the things about measurements. What do you measure in ScrumBan? Of course, you can have your typical velocity chart. How? Because you have a sprint boundary, remember? And you did not do the planning, so you're not going to look at how much was committed, but you are going to look at how much was completed. And you have one of the most popular ones in Kanban called CFD. What is CFD? Cumulative flow diagram. So this is one example of a cumulative flow diagram for a web development project where you have these blue ones are the done, and you see a bottleneck right there where this brown color one is probably is where the workflow is being slowed down. You see that a lot of tasks comes and gets stuck there. So what would you do? You identify that as the bottleneck. In fact, most of the tools that's out there today, the Jira, Riley, and so on, do provide you with this beautiful chart called cumulative flow diagram. I would highly recommend you start using it. The way you would try to get meaning out of this is to identify which are all the workflow stages. And sometimes you figure out that the workflow stage is too big, that it does not give you the details. So you might even want to split the workflow stage into two pieces. For example, if we had kept the coding and code review as one, maybe it's all getting stuck at code review, and maybe the coding is moving faster. So splitting that as coding and code review might help you get more insights as to which stage is really slowing your end-to-end workflow. And then what would you do? You work on it. Maybe either increase the capacity or split it further to see which final stage is the bottleneck. So basically, you fix the bottleneck, and then what does it do next? It reveals what is the next bottleneck, and so on. So here you also have the WIP limit indicated in this purple area. Another interesting one is the lead time and the cycle time. As the chart at the top right indicates, lead time is the entire um, time that a workflow item spends, right from ideation all the way till delivery. Which means the moment the product the item gets into the product backlog, your timer has started. It might sit in the product backlog for a week, maybe a few weeks, a few months, maybe. And then finally you pull it up in a sprint. And then the moment it moves into one of the in progress columns, and that is where the time starts. That is where you start working on it, right? Until it meets done. So what happens is you might think that, oh, okay, yeah, we are able to do things pretty fast. But yeah, that might be your cycle time. But how about your lead time? It could be running into months. That's not good. Yeah. So you take this, the bottom left, you have the chart which you can think of this for either lead time or cycle time, very similar ones. Now, what you really have to start looking at, what is the trend of the lead time and what is the trend of the cycle time on an average over a few weeks time or a few months time. That will help you understand how are we doing. Is our overall flow of work getting faster and better? Yeah. So these are some of the charts that will help you improve your organization. Yeah. And we already talked about how to manage urgent tasks in ScrumBan. The way to do that is to add swim lanes to your ScrumBan board. The critical ones that will be the top of the list, top of the board, which gets immediate attention as you have anything on there. And finally, how do you improve? Continuous improvement is very, very important. Yeah. So that is where we talked about the sprint reviews, where you are able to demonstrate the done um, work items to your stakeholders and get feedback. And that again goes back into the product backlog. You you would have your retrospectives. How do you improve as a team, sprint after sprint? At the end of this retrospective, you have at least one improvement item. You call it the Kaizen, and you pick it up in the next sprint. Yeah. So those are around notes around the continuous improvement. And with that said, is ScrumBan the perfect thing out there? Oh yeah, there's a bit of challenge, right? There is no sprint goal. Hmm. That's is that a problem? What do you think? Not having a sprint goal. What's the impact because of that? Anyone? It's a bit tough one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is that because we do not have sprint planning, we don't have a sprint backlog, and we don't create a sprint goal. So these are things which you need to keep in mind. So what happens because of that is there is no common goal. Having a goal is a great way to keep focus and to align the entire team. Because we would like to have a sprint goal, but we don't have a sprint planning. So we will not have a sprint goal in ScrumBan. So that's a challenge. With that, what did you learn? What are some of your key takeaways? So we talked about Scrum, we talked about Kanban, very, very high level. We looked at what is interrupt pattern, why ScrumBan, and what is ScrumBan, and we went through this sample organization where you are Scrum Mastering called TechFit. We looked at how do we apply this, how do you create the ScrumBan board, what are some of the metrics, including CFD and so on. And we also looked at what are some other practical challenges, if there is any, and we identified one of that. So what did you do? You started implementing ScrumBan at TechFit. With that, first delivery has been faster and better as you are already doing Scrum. But now you are able to accommodate priority shifts and support cases and field issues and so on, without team being feeling bad that, oh, our sprint plan has gone for a toss right after the second day of the sprint. Nobody's complaining about that anymore. They're able to improve. They are getting the feedback from the stakeholders. So they're pretty happy team. That's fantastic, right? Now, what would be your next step? What I would recommend to take forward from here is to run a ScrumBan experiment. Maybe start with just one team, not with the entire organization. Run with one team as ScrumBan and see what are you learning from that. Uh, Help the team first of all understand the need for it, and hopefully they're bought in. You run that, hear from everyone's experience, see what you can improve, and then repeat it. And maybe if it is working out, try for another team. Learn from every experiment that you're running. Okay, so have fun doing this, and I hope you got a clear overview of what is ScrumBan and how would that help you in your um, endeavor to help your teams be in this high performing journey. Thank you for joining us. in the career will webinar. Appreciate your presence here. Any questions before we end the call?
Thanks, Shijo.
Okay. Thank you all. See you another time.